Good evening, everyone. We'll get the regularly scheduled meeting underway here for August the 3rd for the North College Hill City Council. We will start, as always, with our prayer. God, our Father, we are all your servants. We trust in your mercy and love. We trust also in your guidance. Direct the meetings of this council of North College Hill to make good decisions for all the people who live in our city. Give all the members of this council wisdom and insight to know what is best for our city. Help us to be fair and just in all our decisions. Bless us all to do the very best we can with your help and guidance. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I will share my screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Good evening, Ms. Dewald. Can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Miss Bailey,
Here.
Mr. Hedger,
Here.
Miss Underwood,
Here.
Mr. Milanovac,
Here.
Miss Zorb,
Here.
Miss Hartman,
Here.
and Mr. O'Shea.
Here.
All present.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. You do have tonight's agenda.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to accept the agenda as written.
Mr. President, I'll second that.
Was that Miss Bailey? Oh, good name came up. Never mind.
It was. All right.
Thank
We have a
you.
motion. We have a motion from Ms. Zorb with a second from Ms. Bailey to adopt tonight's agenda. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Miss Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Hedger,
Yes.
Miss Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Milanovac,
Yes.
Miss Zorb,
Yes.
Miss Hartman,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. All right. We have several meeting minutes to review and vote on. So we'll start with the meeting minutes from 6/1.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I have read all of these, and unless somebody has an issue, can we do this in one fell swoop?
And as long as nobody has an issue, then I would be fine with that. Would you like to make that motion?
I would love to. Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the minutes from 6/1/2020, 6/15/2020, 7/6/2020, 7/9/2020, and 7/11/2020.
Mr. President,
Mr. Miller Novak.
I will second that motion.
All right, we have a motion from Ms. Zorb with a second from Mr. Miller Novak to adopt all minutes, that is for meetings 6/1, 6/15, 7/6, 7/9, and 7/11. Discussion? Ms. Dewald, please call the roll.
Thank you. Ms. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Hedger,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak,
Yes.
Ms. Zorb,
Yes.
Ms. Hartman,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0 for all minutes.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, Ms. Dewald, communications.
The only thing we have for communications is the July Mayor's Court Report. I sent emails out. I've sent the wrong one the first time. So the second one is the correct one, but they don't have a hard copy in their mailbox. So if you've already cleaned out your mailbox, if you want a hard copy of the July court report, I can make sure that one's in there.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions
Thank
for
you.
Ms. Dewald? All right, move on to committee reports, starting with budget and finance.
We have not met since our last meeting. Our next meeting will be Monday, this upcoming Monday at 7:30 p.m.
And the date on that is the 11th.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Next committee, city and community development and recreation.
We also have not met since the last council meeting. Our next meeting will be this upcoming Monday at 6:30.
Thank you, Mr. Hedger.
Mr. President,
Mr. Mosby.
sorry, just a point of order, though. I believe that date is the 10th, next Monday.
Oh, it is. You're right. I'm sorry. It is the 10th. Thank you, sir. Yeah, can't read a phone calendar, apparently. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Public safety.
Thank you, Mr. President. My computer is still working on updates. It says this will take a while. That's the message that I'm seeing. So I apologize that I can't, because we live in the digital age. My report is on my computer and I can't access it at this time. But we did recently meet, and my memory would not do the meeting minutes justice. So I will give an update at our next meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood. Moving on to rules and public policy.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of our primary goals is to create an easily printable copy of the charter with all the amendments included. And I went ahead and verified that the online information has been updated, and I've compiled the official online information into a Google Doc that I shared earlier today for my colleagues to review. I believe, Mr. Raver, I copied you on, or I included you on that also.
Yes, sir.
And I understand, it was last minute today, and I wouldn't expect anyone necessarily to have had an opportunity to review those changes. So hopefully by the first meeting, our next meeting, hopefully we'll be able to have any discussion necessary and review and or approve that document for the official printable copy. Also, we continue to discuss the need to update some outdated ordinances, particularly those that are related to council's duty to approve the appointment of the building official, and also there's the ones that are inconsistent pertaining to parking of motor vehicles and boats, trailers, campers, and recreational vehicles on private property. And we also briefly discussed making some incremental updates to the rules of council instead of doing like a big sweeping rewrite. And then we also talked a little bit about standardizing the use of electronic documents. I believe that's kind of the bulk of what's going on in rules of public policy. Our next meeting scheduled at its usual time and date on the fourth Monday of the month, beginning at 6:30. The next one is August 24th. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. I did try to go to that, and for some reason, my company's server is blocking me from going to look at Google Docs, so I got to figure that out. All right, any ad hoc reports?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea?
on behalf of the North College Hill Chamber of Commerce, a quick update on that. The world's longest yard sale begins this Thursday. The Chamber is not officially hosting a yard sale event this year. However, on Saturday, the Chamber will have some tables set up beginning around 8 a.m. at the Perkins parking lot. And any sale or proceeds from what we sell at that yard sale will go toward the North College Hill High School Scholarship Fund. And if anyone has anything that they'd like to donate, any treasures that you have in your possession, you'd like to donate them to the Chamber that we might sell and contribute to the scholarship fund, you can drop those off Saturday morning sometime before noon. And that's about all I have from the Chamber at this time.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. Any other ad hoc reports?
Mr. President,
Ms.
I
Orr?
have two items. My first one is, I did mention it in our safety committee meeting, but I would like to make sure that all of council is aware that ICRC now has offered what they call a hybrid, I'm using air quotes, a hybrid meeting, so that if anyone had the strong desire to sit in council chambers for this, that they were working on buying the equipment to allow that to occur. So if anyone has that strong desire, please let me know. They also have the ability to have what they call webinar, so that like in the event we had to have an interactive meeting with residents or any participant for that matter, they have the ability for that also. So if anyone, we don't have to discuss it now if you don't want. If anyone has that strong desire, please email me and let me know. The second thing I'd like to, maybe it's just me, but when I look at the calendar, it looks like our last council meeting was on July the 6th. But finance and community and development, they had meetings on the second Monday, and we haven't had a council meeting since then. So I think they both have reports to give. It's kind of where I'm going with that.
Mr. President.
Yeah, I believe you would be right. Mr. Hedger?
My meeting was canceled, so I do not have any report to give.
Thank you, sir.
Then you are off the hook.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bailey?
I can give a report. So we talked about the salary ordinance for an exhaustive amount of time. It still is not correct. Mr. Mosby and myself are going to start working on that. We also talked about various different ways of trying to find revenue for the city. As we know, our revenue streams are flat and the cost of living is going up. One of those was a permissive vehicle tax, among others. Let's see here. And we spoke about the Dallas Avenue house and what a fair asking value for that was. And I believe that pretty much sums it up.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. thank you, Ms. Zorb, for the update with ICRC. Any other ad hoc reports?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bailey?
from OKI, we did get notification that their grantors had $10,000 that North College Hill could potentially get in order to do energy saving measures for the city. Some of those being trees and whatnot, because they did an energy saving study for us. And after reading it, I think that, fingers crossed, I'm sure Mr. Mosby can tell us more about that in just a few. But on the other hand, we are going to do a program with them called Taking Root. And they will come to North College Hill and give 50 citizens free trees to plant. And so I think that's really exciting. And as soon as I know more details, you guys will.
How many did you say?
50, but I'm trying to talk them out of some more.
That's actually a lot of trees.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for ad hoc?
Mr. President, could I have a follow-up question for?
Yes, you may.
Bailey? I was wondering, is there any way to use that money to change our street lights to LED lights?
Possibly. It kind of seems like, so maybe the way that I understand it is one of them is like a match on equipment. Another option would be to do, to plant trees and to turn down the heat. See, that helps us on energy, but they're looking more at like urban heat. How do we make our city cooler as far as pavement asphalt goes, is the way that I understand it. But Ms. Zorb, I will forward it to all of council so that way you guys can read it too. Cool.
Yes, thank you.
Any other reports? All right, we will move on to the administrative reports and turn it over to Madam Mayor, Ms. Nichols.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. I really don't have a lot to report. I'm glad Ms. Bailey, she did talk about the Taking Root. She had contacted me about that and sent that information on, so I had to compile a letter to tell them that we were interested and wanted to be a part of that program. So I'm glad that we did get approved because I didn't hear back from her on whether we did or not. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, I'm not sure if everyone is aware that Maslow's Army was here about a week or two ago. They went to the corner where the young man was hit by the car, and they had a nice group. They're interested, or they wanted to know what our feedback was, and I told them I would bring it back to council to see if we could purchase signs. We did have a couple people that came up and wanted to know if they had extra signs that said slow down, 25 miles per hour. I stood out there for roughly almost an hour, and I was really surprised that even though they were standing there at the curb in the street, that the traffic still continued to go over 25 miles per hour. So I'm not sure if that's something we can consider long run or down the line. Some people wanted yard signs, which is what they had, that says 25 miles per hour, slow down. And one of the other things, I came back prior to that because I had gotten a few emails or people just in general asking me about speed bumps. I know Ms. Zorb had brought that up before. So, with talking with Mr. Mosby, I was expressing to him, I know one of the concerns was speed bumps and how they would affect our trucks during the winter months. So I don't know if there's a way that we could, so we talked about it. There's no conclusion. We don't have a final answer yet. Possibly maybe we getting some speed bumps that we can just apply during the summer months and the spring months, and then remove them during the winter. Because I know everybody says people speed up and down streets, especially a cut through. If you don't live on a cut through, it may not affect you, but people speed everywhere they go. It's really bad on my street. People hit 55 to 60 miles per hour. We don't have, the kids that are over here are grandkids, you know, that visit. So that's something else to consider. We're looking into that, but we just don't know at this particular point, considering where our budget is, and maybe, you know, if we can look around for grants or something. Some idea, because the one sign just isn't working. That sign was posted there as well, that police radar. And I was just really shocked at the amount of people that still continue to speed on that street with, there had to be about 30, 40 people there. So that's really all I have.
Any questions for the mayor? Yeah, I was
Yes.
muted. Yes, go ahead.
Ms. Nichols,
Yes.
I don't know why, but when everyone speaks, I'm getting a little bit of an annoyance. And you said something, I thought you said Army. Could you please tell me?
Maslow's
Who?
Army is a group that they generally,
Okay.
what they
Would you repeat that again, please?
is Maslow's Army. They find shelter for homeless people.
Yes.
For homeless families. And
Okay.
actually, I believe that the young man and his family lived in one of their properties, or the property of a gentleman.
I just didn't get that first name, but thank you. I have it now.
So one more thing about that, they are requesting also, and I shared this with Mr. Mosby, it'll just be something, I guess, down the line. They want stop signs posted there. And another thing that he offered was, he says he has a company, if we want it, they would put crosswalks in various areas to try to slow down traffic as well. He said he would do that for the city free of charge.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
yes, Madam Mayor, one thing that did occur at the public safety meeting was Mr. Hedger actually presented us with a very detailed program regarding speed humps. And it is something that we intend to follow up on. There just wasn't enough time to make that happen before today's meeting, but that is definitely something that we want to follow up on. And I believe Mr. Hedger can obviously give us more information about it, because I still can't access my documents, but we would be able to get buy-in from the people who live on individual streets. And I, in fact, did receive an email from someone who lives on one of the cut-through streets as well, who tells me that, his car has been hit several times, and the speeding on the cut-through streets is a real problem. And I would just, if Mr. Hedger could, just kind of give us a little more information about that.
Sure, I can definitely do that. Like Ms. Underwood said, I did propose a new proposal for speed humps. I'm sorry if you hear my dogs in the background. So it is a resident-led program that allows residents to petition the city to have speed humps first looked at to see if their street's eligible, and then ultimately determine what the priority level is if speed humps are eligible on the street, and then petition the residents and businesses on that street to actually have speed humps hopefully installed. And depending on the funding level, it would both be paid by private and public funding. So it's just a overall proposal. It's currently with the law director now, and I'm hoping to have that by the next couple days or so.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood and Mr. Hedger. Anything else for the mayor? All right, if there is none, we will turn it over to the city administrator for his report. Mr. Mosby.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm hoping everyone can hear me. I think I'd like to begin actually, first of all, by saying thank you to Mrs. DeWald. I have to say that it's really been very pleasant working with her, and I know sometimes I call her pretty early in the morning. So I know it could be an inconvenience, but not once has she ever expressed any kind of anger or dissatisfaction. So I appreciate her patience, and I can't begin to express how important it is, obviously, for legislation and administration to work together. So I just wanted to say thank you for everything she's done as clerk. So a few things. And I guess these are not in any particular order, but I am going to take a little time to respond to a couple of things that I've heard so far. So the issue of the OKI grant was raised. So a little bit of background. OKI there was a grant that was there was a grantor who gave the Greater Cincinnati Energy Alliance some money, and they chose 8 different communities, and we happen to be one of those communities. And so they came in and they did a study, and then they made certain recommendations. And part of the contingency to be eligible for some of the funds was that we had to be able to put together matching funds for some of the recommendations. I made it very clear at the outset that we were not going to be able to do that. So they did go ahead, because obviously their grantor had given them money to do the study. They did, but I had told them that we were not going to be able to have the funds to match. However, most recently, as Ms. Bailey did point out, at the end of the program, apparently there were $10,000 that were left over that had not been used. And so what they did was they approached us and said, look, we fortunately have $10,000 that was left over. It still has to be used toward energy, but it doesn't require any kind of a matching. It doesn't require any kind of a match. So I did talk to them, and kind of based on some of the things that we had discussed, I put in a proposal for them to do a feasibility study to look at electric vehicle charging stations, to see what the feasibility of putting those in the city of North College Hill is. So we should hear back from them by the 10th, I believe, or excuse me, yes, by the 10th, as to whether or not the grantor will approve that. But they were very open and receptive to the idea. So that is where that is the status of where we are on the particular $10,000 grant now. As the mayor and as Mr. Hedger had mentioned about speed bumps, and obviously it is with Mr. Dieters, I will just point out something with speed bumps. We obviously know that not just in North College Hill, but in all the other areas, A, we have more cars on the road. B, we have faster cars. And so because of that, we have people that want to exceed the speed limit. Speed bumps obviously are calming measures. However, there are, with every measure comes its challenges. And besides the fact of the public vehicles, particularly the snow plows that come through that may end up damaging the speed bumps themselves, the other one that is of greater concern to me, honestly, is emergency vehicles. When a person needs an emergency vehicle to come through and time is of the essence, those, every second counts, as we all know. I would be concerned about the emergency vehicles having to slow down because they're going over, some of these speed bumps. So it is something that I don't know where Mr. Dieters is on it. I would suspect that knowing him as I do, that he'll probably put together some kind of an analysis of it, a pro and con. But I do want people to think that, or at least just take some time to consider that there certainly are some challenges to installing speed bumps. I wanted everyone to know that there is scheduled for August the 12th, which is a Wednesday, another COVID pop-up site. I was approached by Hamilton County to ask whether or not we could do that again. Of course, as you all know, we did do one back in July. And while it worked well up until the time that it rained, the rain unfortunately cut it short. However, they did like the location, which is LifeSpring Community Church. And they certainly like the way that the traffic or the cars were managed while they were on the parking lot. So assuming that Clovernook or LifeSpring Community Church, excuse me, is willing to do it, we will plan on having that on Wednesday, August the 12th from noon until 4 p.m. In this next month, excuse me, for the September Finance Committee meeting, I just wanted everyone to be aware that we will be, and when I say we, I mean myself and the department heads, will be prepared to present a preliminary 2021 budget to the Finance Committee. I do want to make sure that there is plenty of time, for council to deliberate. Hopefully, the goal would be for us to have a final budget passed before the end of the year. What I will say is that this COVID-19 is really shaken things up a lot. Fortunately for us, so far, we have withstood, a lot. We haven't seen, at least initially, we haven't seen, because we don't really have a lot of big businesses, we haven't seen, big businesses shut down. However, we have seen, as most of you are aware, things like, Frisch's has, permanently closed their dining room, which unfortunately means, loss of revenue and as a result, loss of jobs. And so, there has been that impact. We also were looking forward to McDonald's doing a major renovation, and that has been pushed back to 2021. So, and on the flip side, however, of course, as you all know, there is some good news. I mean, DaVita Dialysis has already started work on building their dialysis center, and with that, hopefully, we will have approximately 13 full. Well, there would be the equivalent of, I believe, 13 full-time equivalents or 13 FTEs. But saying all that, we're not sure where this is headed. So I will already tell you that we're going to be very conservative as far as what we are projecting. I will also keep in mind, however, that this is that next year, one of our biggest expenses, as you all know, is personnel. And according to the last full-time police officer contract, there were 3 straight years of 4% increase. And so, next year there will be a 4% increase in police personnel. So that will have to be considered in the budget as well. We, as far as road improvements are concerned, our road program, we have officially, it's already officially been or being published now, but we are accepting bids for the Galbraith Goodman project. That bid opening will take place on Wednesday, August the 19th, and that will be at 11 o'clock a.m. in the city center in the council chambers. So we don't have a specific time frame on it yet, but obviously once we find out who the winning contractor is, we will then be in the process of actually setting up the time frame for the improvement. So at this particular point, we are on track to begin that program. The Sundale program will be and of course you have actually 2 pieces of legislation before you this evening for both of those projects, but the Sundale program we are looking at for 2021. Also, the street sweeping, Marty will be actually doing street sweeping this month and next month. We know that obviously there was some of this was pushed back for this particular year, but there will be street sweeping in obviously August, and then also in September, and I believe also October. We'll be going into, so we're going into the fall with some of the street sweeping. So, Mr. President, that's all I have for right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. Are there any questions for the city administrator?
Mr. President.
Ms. Bailey.
Mr. Mosby, just a heads up. So the Ohio Municipal League compiled all of the cities that turned in their resolution in grant funding for CARES Act, and they do not have us as registered yet.
Oh, I apologize, Ms. Bailey. We actually received the CARES funding already.
Okay, cool.
So yes, but I'm glad you mentioned that, and thank you. And I do apologize to council for neglecting that. There are some stipulations. So one of the stipulations is we have to have all of that money committed, which this really shouldn't be a problem for us, but we have to have all the money committed at least by October. And then any monies that are not committed would then have to be turned back. And then by the end of December, if it's not used, then that money also has to go back to the states. But yes, we did receive our share of the CARES Act funding.
Mr. Mosby?
Yes.
What was the amount that we received?
Approximately $104,000.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Ms. Zorb.
Apologize, I got a cough right in there. So, Mr. Mosby, I know that the whole speed bump conversation, I've heard it for years and years, and I understand the hesitation for the emergency vehicles. One other topic that was mentioned was temporary speed humps that would, I assume, would be maintained by Public Works, like placed in the road by Public Works and then maybe monitored by the police. Is that something that would be more palatable for administration? It's clear something has to be done. I mean, people go 50 up. I think people try to see how fast they can go around this bend here. I really think it's a challenge. Maybe there's like a secret Facebook page where they post their highest score. I don't know. But it's really obnoxious and it's dangerous. I've had several cars in my front yard. So something has to be done. We have to find some solution. So maybe it's a lot more patrols. The other thing is I noticed on the monthly mayor's court, looks like we're down $20,000 in revenue from fines. So maybe we step up patrolling. What can that possibly hurt? Let's get some more revenue from the speeders. Let's fine them. Or we can, like I said, have the temporary, the word I'm trying to use, speed humps. Thank you.
Mr. President.
I mean, there are options that are available. We have to find the right one and we have to enforce it.
Ms. Nichols.
Ms. Zorb, those were actually what Mr. Mosby and myself had discussed, the removable speed bumps, which is what I said earlier. That's what he's looking into, what the costs were. But then I also want to see what Mr. Hedger and Ms. Underwood, what they were talking about. Maybe it's something, because if it's something that someone else can do per grants or what have you, the city doesn't really, we want our citizens to be safe, but if it's a grant, something that we can do without us spending money, that's why I was unaware that they were looking into that. I wasn't able to make the last safety meeting, but we had discussed, Mr. Mosby and myself, removable speed bumps. And the other thing that you talked about, I'm sorry, it just slipped my mind.
Increased patrolling?
The increase, yeah, and Mr. Mosby, I'm sorry, and myself had also talked about the police officers issuing more tickets. Because anybody who sits at the light of Clovernall and Hamilton Avenue you have to do almost a 10 count because they run that light regularly.
Well, and like I said, Madam Mayor, if you look at that mayor's court report, it's glaringly obvious.
It is.
The
It is.
the
It's
revenue is
almost
down $20,000.
$20,000, right? It's down
That's
$20,000.
that's
And
a
I don't
chunk.
know if that's because they're not issuing the tickets or if it's just because everything, I think they're doing it by phone. Mr. Mosby, do you know if they're going to open back next week?
I'm sorry. No, I'm not certain whether or not that is. I will say that you are correct, Madam Mayor, that it's not simply, it isn't because of lack of issuing tickets. In fact, I did specifically speak with Chief Schran to make sure that there were more patrols that were out and making sure that each shift, is spending time specifically on the streets to issue those tickets, obviously wherever they can. And I know that has been done. But we also know that obviously the mayor's court has not been held, not in the physical sense, for some time now. And so, as the mayor just pointed out, they have been doing it by phone. And so I do know that is part of the reason for the reduction in the fees, but I can check on the other things to make sure.
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger.
Well, I have a question along with the, more policing, issuing more citations. It sounds like you've asked for, for that to happen. Can we get specific numbers on the percentage that's increased? Because asking for something and then actually getting the data behind it, I think is two different things. Personally, I would like to see what the data is. What's the percentage increase once you've requested that to happen?
Data as far as what you're talking about, as far as tickets issued?
Yeah, the data for as far as citations for speeding, reckless driving. What is the?
Yeah, I can speak with Chief Schran, and I guess it would probably be most appropriate to submit that to the Public Safety Committee. So I can make sure that we have that for the Public Safety Committee meeting.
So Mike, I guess another question is, do we want to have a goal of what we want to see increase? Do we want to see a 10% increase, a 20% increase? Do we have a goal? I'm sure that's something we can discuss in public safety more in depth, but that's, just some of my offhand thinking here.
I apologize, Mr. President.
Ms. Underwood.
Just to Mr. Hedger's point, Mr. Mosby, we have requested, or I know I have been requesting and nagging and requesting reports from the police department. And we've had an issue with the police software, and I'm just wondering what the status of that is. Is there any intent to actually purchase that software or compile those statistics? I'm just wondering where we are with that process.
Yeah, I apologize. I actually thought that I had stated earlier that we had already, the chief had already looked at a software. We agreed on that, and we were looking at October as the time frame for when we would actually have the software purchased and beginning to get installed.
So, Mr. Mosby, my next question then is, so from the time that the last software crashed until now, has there been some kind of system in place to keep track of the number of citations and like the number of traffic citations issued, the number of like reckless driving, OVIs, that kind of thing, as well as any other crimes that may or may not have occurred within the city of North College Hill?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Mosby? Hearing none, we'll move on to the law director's report. Mr. Dieters.
Hi, Mr. President. I'm not able to be on video because I'm actually driving, so I figured it might be a good idea not to watch the video while I'm traveling. A couple things. One, Mr. Hedger did send to me a fairly comprehensive guideline document related to the installation of speed humps, or whatever measures you want to call them. It does provide a process by which individuals can petition for it, and then it has a pretty comprehensive guideline about the standards or parameters that would be put in place or looked at to determine whether a installation of such a device would be appropriate. What I intend to do is probably within the next day or two, it'll be sent over to him and his committee, just an ordinance adopting those guidelines, and then council will need to look at those guidelines pretty comprehensively after the committee would approve it and send it forward. There are lots of factors that have to be taken into consideration when you put a speed hump in, and all of this document does take those into consideration and gets input from different departments, etc. So I think a lot of that work has already been done, or found that someone else had already done it, and we're obviously going to use that. So that is on its way. I don't know when the next committee meeting is, but you guys will have plenty of time for that. Secondly, I don't know who it was that asked the question, but you have to be really careful about setting goals for the tickets. That's quota systems, and those are typically held to be unconstitutional. So you can't necessarily tell the police we want 25% more speeding tickets, but you can tell them you want to increase patrols, which likely would result in more citations. Mr. President, or that's all I have, unless there's any other questions. Just those two issues are what I wanted to address this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Dieters. Any questions for the law director?
Mr. President.
Mr. Mosby.
I am terribly sorry. There was one other issue that I overlooked, and I apologize, but I did want to bring to council's attention. I'm pretty sure that most people on council are aware of it, but tomorrow is election day for the city of Mount Healthy, and they will be voting on whether or not to increase their tax levy for the purpose of establishing a more complete fire department. If the levy passes, what that means is that they will be hiring 7 full-time firefighters, which in essence means that they will have, 2 for 24 hours, basically every day, and they'll be working, a regular firefighter's shift. Now, why that's important to us is, of course, as we all know, the city did not approve the levy increase to create the joint fire district. If Mount Healthy does, then every municipality that surrounds us will have enough full-time firefighters to staff their fire department. We, however, do not. And actually, for there have been a number of days now where we have been short on being able to, have enough even part-time firefighters to fully staff our firehouse, which means, long story short, that we will probably be more dependent on mutual aid. I do bring this to council's attention just because once again, I think it's important for council to kind of be aware of, what the implications of such an election are and how that may end up impacting us. So again, I thank you for your time for that.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. Any questions for Mr. Dieters? All right, so it's not on the agenda, but Ms. Hall is on here. Is there anything for you to report, Ms. Hall?
Not at this time, but definitely in the finance committee meeting next week, I'll be presenting a financial report.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we'll move on to call of members. Ms. Bailey.
Mr. President, I don't really have much. I do want to say thank you again to Ms. Thorpe and everybody at SERV for planting the sunflowers. They really brighten my day. And Mr. O'Shea, thank you for compiling the charter and getting it out to us. I appreciate it. That's all I got.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, Mr. Hedger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank Ms. Underwood for letting me come to her committee and propose the speed hump proposal. I think that would do a lot of good, and it gives residents a actual procedure and option to slowing down drivers on their street. I think that's something that the committee and council should seriously consider. No matter the ramifications we can discuss with emergency vehicles or snow plows or maintenance of such, I think it's something that we do need to consider moving forward. And I also think moving forward, we need to talk about other traffic calming solutions with either increasing policing productivity or, discussing other traffic calming solutions that can be installed on roads. I think this is an important topic. And I think it's something that we need to do. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Hedger. Next up is Ms. Underwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to remind council that we really do need to figure out how to help our fire department. I did mention this in our last committee meeting, but I will, let council know that we actually were short. My understanding is that we were short fire personnel when the young man was hit by the car in North College Hill. So there was an issue. I think they had to contact the police department to get him to the hospital. And, that's a very, kind of in your face situation with regard to not having, the staff that we need. So it's, it's definitely an issue. I think we need to figure out, how to resolve. Also, just the traffic calming solutions, whether it's speed humps or something else. I really believe that that's important as well. There's just, there's just too much of a potential with us being a walking school district for, kids to get hurt with the number of cars that are speeding through the streets. It's very concerning. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood. Mr. Miller Novak, it's your turn.
Yeah, I have a few things. I just want to thank, I think I said it during the committee meetings, but I'll say it again today, Mr. O'Shea and Ms. Underwood for holding really well organized meetings. I thought our committee meetings were really productive. Mr. Hedger, thanks for bringing forward a plan regarding speed bumps. I mean, regardless of what we do and what path we take, the conversation has been productive, and it's another option that I think none of us were aware of. So thanks for doing that. I think we're on the mask ordinance, and I know I've talked about it in the past, but I do want to point out that since the state has taken the path to mandate usage, whether or not it can be enforced, I do gratefully see almost entire compliance, because I think Ms. Underwood said in the past about stop signs, which I thought was a brilliant analogy in the sense that we often roll up to stop signs, don't see a cop in any direction, don't even see a car, and we still stop because there might be people who are pro-mask or anti-mask, but a vast majority of people are law-abiding citizens and they will follow laws, and therein lies, I think, the strength of having a policy in place. And finally, yeah, I've noticed the sunflowers too. They're really cool. So Mary Jo and her group for doing that. Thanks. And I hope you'll suffer a small story from me. I used to be quite a mythology dude because I took it in high school. And one of my favorite stories is kind of sad, but kind of pretty, is about the sunflower and the reason it turns with the sun. And I'm just going to make you all suffer it. So Clytie was a woman who was in love with Apollo, and they were together for a spell, and Apollo kind of fell in love with another woman, and Clytie got jealous and told her father about the relationship, and her father buried her alive. Apollo got upset and turned Clytie into a flower, aka a sunflower, and even in her flower form, she still was in love with Apollo, and she would turn her head to watch him fly across the sky with his chariot in the sun every day. So remember that story when you drive down Hamilton. See the sunflowers looking one direction in the morning and the other direction when you drive home. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller Novak. Ms. Zorb.
I wonder if he has a story for the tulips too.
I actually do.
No, your time is up. It's my time.
Absolutely, your time is up.
I'll do it next meeting.
No. No, I lost my whole train of thought. That's what I get. I lost it. It's gone. Oh no, here it is. Sorry. Temporary delay. So I'm wondering if the school, I believe, was granted a safe places. What was that walking thing? Can we get money for crosswalks or speeding signs or speed humps from the, it's like safe places to walk or something? Madam Mayor, do you know what I'm referring to?
Mr. President.
Ms. Bailey was first.
Safe routes to school.
That's it. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Mr. Mosby.
Yes, it is safe routes to school, and I have met with the Ohio Department of Transportation, and we have already put together the plan for that. It does have to do with some of the crosswalks are included in that, but that plan has been put together, and actually I think they will begin with that plan also, I believe, 2021.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. Thank you, Ms. Zorb. Mr. Oshak. Hold on, Ms. Hartman. Sorry, Ms. Hartman.
Hello. Thank you. I'm going to share a story that happened last Saturday. My son was making his first communion, so we had a little bit more people show up out to church. And as everything was letting out, church was letting out, there was a group of teenagers yelling at us. It felt like it was yelling at everyone leaving church, telling us that white people suck and BLM lives matter. And they kept repeating it. And it was kind of, I don't know if not many people were happy with that feeling and vibe they were getting from those kids. And then on another note, it's my understanding the car show is canceled due to some politics in the city. So that's kind of a bummer. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Hartman. Now, Mr. O'Shea.
Thank you, Mr. President. At a previous meeting, it might have been the July 8th special meeting or July 9th, somewhere in there, there was some discussion about trying to fit multiple special meetings on one date. And I had remembered looking through information to try to see if that was a possibility. And I know in our charter, it does not specify that that is or is not an option. However, much of our charter comes directly from the Ohio Revised Code, and a lot of it is nearly verbatim from the ORC. And in the ORC, it does state that readings have to take place on 3 separate dates. Now, like I said, I realize that our charter does not specify if the readings can be on same dates or whatever. And it really wasn't something we were necessarily going to pursue immediately, but just for future reference, that is something that we may want to look at if we feel there's a potential for a legal complaint if we were to try to have multiple meetings on one date. Other than that, I have nothing else at this time.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. That's good research. All right, we're up to legislation. Ms. Dewald.
Alrighty. So tonight we have a first, I'm reaching for the microphone. Tonight we have a first reading on Resolution 13, 2020, a resolution declaring the official intent and reasonable expectation of the city of North College Hill on behalf of the state of Ohio, the borrower, to reimburse its street levy fund for the Sundale Avenue reconstruction. There is a code in here, CBO5X. I don't know what that means. With the proceeds of tax-exempt debt of the state of Ohio. First reading.
Mr. President.
Ms. Zorb.
I noticed that this particular, actually, Resolution 13 and 14 both make mention to an Appendix A, and I don't believe I've received that.
Mr.
Does anyone
President,
have any additional information?
Ms. Dewald.
I do not have an Appendix A for either piece of legislation to send to council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Mosby.
Yes, these 2 resolutions are basically resolutions that are affirming to the state that the monies that will be used to reimburse basically the restricted funds. So long story short, it simply means that this money will be used only for the road funds. The appendices, excuse me, are the projects themselves, which obviously can be, they're fairly lengthy, in terms of the pages. But that is the purpose of these particular resolutions, is just to affirm with the state that we will strictly use these funds for the purpose that they're supposed to be used, which is our roads fund.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood.
Mr. Mosby, can I ask you to send a copy of the appendices to the members of council so that they can review those? Because during the Public Safety Committee meeting, I did have several questions about what specifically would be included with both of those projects, and it would be extremely helpful to expedite this entire process if you could send copies of those appendices to council.
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you. Ms. Dewald, next.
First reading on Resolution 14, 2020, a resolution declaring the official intent and reasonable expectation of the city of North College Hill on behalf of the state of Ohio, the borrower, to reimburse its street levy fund for the Galbraith and Goodman improvements, CB23X, with the proceeds of tax-exempt debt of the state of Ohio.
Mr. President.
Ms. Underwood.
I'm not sure if this is the right point in time, and if as a point of order, if I'm doing this incorrectly, somebody please correct me. But at this time, I would like to make a motion to amend the appendices of Resolution 14, 2020 to require everyone submitting a bid to include a traffic survey for traffic calming solutions on Galbraith Road.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bailey?
I'll second that.
I'm sorry, Ms. Underwood, can you repeat your motion?
I move that we amend the appendices to Resolution 14-2020 to require all individuals submitting a bid to include a traffic survey for traffic calming solutions on Galbraith Road.
Mr. President, discussion.
Yes, Ms. Orb.
I'm looking over my notes and I thought I had heard Mr. Mosby say that that already went out for bid and the bids were expected back on the 19th. No, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong line item. I forget when they are. Mr. Mosby, can you
President.
help me? Thank you.
Mr. Mosby?
Ms. Zorb is correct. The announcement already went out, and so the bidders are in the process right now of preparing the bids. What I said was that the bids will be opened, excuse me, on Wednesday, August the 19th. So at this particular point, we are already in the process of those bids, which basically include the specs, which are on location at the engineer's office. And so those specs that I know of right now do not include that specific provision that Ms. Underwood just proposed. But I will tell you that as part of their process, the any bidder, any company who comes in, they have to pay $100, even to pick up a copy of those specs. And so I don't believe that we are in a place that we can alter what has already been processed and submitted and is being submitted to the bidders, or being made available to the bidders. I'm sorry.
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger?
From my understanding, with having an RFP or a bid, they can always be amended even before an actual bidder has been selected. And the people who have already paid for or purchased that bid can be notified of such changes. I mean, I've done multiple RFPs before for my own job, and we've made changes for things that have happened in the middle of it for something that we needed to change, and we were able to notify everyone of those requested changes. And since we haven't selected one, I don't think we are too late.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor from Ms. Underwood. The second is by Ms. Bailey to amend the appendices in Resolution 14-2020 to require all bids include a traffic survey to add traffic calming solutions. Did I get that right, Ms. Underwood?
Mr. President, if I may, real quick, you can amend it, but then you're going to have to delay the opening of the bids and the appropriate time. So if you do an amendment, it's as if you had a new bid document come out under the competitive bidding statute for Ohio law. So if you do amend it, it just means you could potentially delay the project, and I don't know what timelines that could or could not impact. You have to have Mr. Mosby tell you that.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Ms. Underwood?
My motion does include mention of Galbraith Road. So traffic calming solutions on Galbraith Road.
Mr. President.
Mr. O'Shea?
It seems like we just mentioned or was informed that we do not have the appendices for either resolution. So I'm a little concerned how why we're talking about amending something that we haven't read, or did someone else read it and I'm not aware?
Mr. President.
Mr. Mosby.
Okay, so I think we need to make something clear, so I don't want anything to be confused. The appendice is basically the agreement that we have with the state as far as the project is concerned. This would not include the specs that the engineer is giving to the prospective bidders. So there is a difference between the two.
Mr. President, I have two questions.
Ms. Zorb.
My first question will be to Mr. Dieters. How long of a delay would that put into the bid opening process? And my second question would be to Mr. Mosby. If we were to make this, then where would this motion be placed in this document?
Mr. President, if I could answer that question real quick.
Mr. Dieters.
I don't know specifically, Mary Jo, but typically bids have to be out for 30 days unless this particular project with the state has a different timeline. But you would, if you're supposed to open on the 12th, it would delay it another 30 days from today at least, unless there's a longer period of time that this project has because of the state money.
President.
Mr. Hedger.
It was my understanding, Mr. Mosby, that this just went out today. Is that correct? You just advertised it today?
The advertisement has to be in the paper. At least they're putting it in. It has to be out at least 10 business days before the opening.
So is that today that it
Correct.
happened?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Ms. Zorb had a question for you, Mr. Mosby, regarding where this would be put into this ordinance, if not in the.
I cannot say, Mr. President. I actually don't know because there is no in the proposal that you're talking about. There is no specific measure that you're looking at, and so if you're, it's vague in that sense. So I'm not sure where it would go. What I could say is if council did vote on it immediately, what I would have to do is go to the engineer, and I think that both in fact, I know both Mr. Dieters and Mr. Hedger would be correct. I mean, they would end up having to basically alter or amend the specs for the prospective bidders. They would have to withdraw that, and then we would have to start all over. We would have to then put out a new bid opening date. So I can't say how long that would take. I'm just not certain.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood.
my understanding is that this project is not due to start until 2021. Is that accurate, Mr. Mosby?
I guess it's actually going to depend on, actually, I don't know at this particular point. Obviously, the first thing we have to do is get the bidder. And then, yes, they're going to have the pre-construction meetings and all of that. So more than likely, if unless we can do that, before the end of the construction season, which that could happen, but if not, then it would have to begin in 2021.
And just to address Mr. O'Shea's question, I don't know if it was a question about my specific motion, but what my motion is asking, what I'm asking is that even without having read the appendix, that this be a requirement, that there be required, that, each bidder be required to include a traffic survey for traffic calming solutions on Galbraith Road. Now, certainly, unless the language is already there, which I'm assuming that it is not, I just want that language or that requirement to be included in the appendix.
Mr. President.
Mr. O'Shea.
Then I guess what happened to resolution 13? If we want it in 14, why? Okay, I guess only because you're concerned about Galbraith Road. Okay, I'm done.
All right, so I mean, the motion is to amend the appendices. Would it be more accurate to say amend the specs?
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. That would be more specific because it's not the appendix. It's going to be in the specs.
I'm sorry, was that you, Mr. Miller Novak?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring up what Mr. O'Shea said. I mean, my understanding was that this bid was for, I mean, am I wrong? It's for specific roads, isn't it?
Mr. President.
Mr. Mosby?
Yeah, to answer Mr. Miller Novak's question, the answer is yes. The first project is for the Galbraith and Goodman roads, and more specifically, Galbraith beginning at Bobolink, basically traveling westward to the intersection of Hamilton and Galbraith, and then Goodman from the beginning at the intersection of Goodman and Galbraith and ending at the intersection of Hamilton and Goodman.
Okay, Mr. President.
Mr. Miller Novak?
I mean, I know that we really are talking about speed humps and things like that. I just, these are main strips. I mean, it's not normally where people put speed humps. And if these project is specifically getting bids for this main strips, I mean, I think we're kind of addressing the speed hump issue,
Mr. President.
wrong legislation and the wrong call for bids. So I don't know that we want to do that.
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger?
To address Mr. Miller Novak's question, traffic calming is not only just speed humps. I mean, there's multiple different ways of traffic calming, and that would be up to the engineers and the builders to actually give us their recommendations for Galbraith. I'm sure they would take that into consideration, being that they are major roads and thoroughfares. But there are many ways to calm traffic, not other than speed humps.
Okay, so we're gonna take this to a vote. Ms. Underwood, we're gonna change it to say amend the specs, right? Ms. Underwood?
That's fine. I'm sorry. Do I need to amend my motion to say, to make it, to include it in the specs? If so, that's what I amend my motion to include that language.
Mr. President,
Yes, Ms. Dewald.
Dewald. So this is strictly for amending resolution 14.
Yes, ma'am, specific to Galbraith Road. So it should say amend the specs for resolution 14-2020 to require all bids include a traffic survey to add traffic calming solutions on Galbraith Road.
Okay, thank you.
All right, please call the roll.
And this is to amend resolution 14. Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Hedger?
Yes.
Ms. Underwood?
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak?
Yes.
Ms. Zorb?
Yes.
Ms. Hartman?
Yes.
Mr. O'Shea?
No.
Motion to amend passes 6-1.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dewald. Let's move on to the next one, please.
We have a second reading on ordinance 7/2020, an ordinance to approve current replacement pages to the North College Hill codified ordinances and declaring an emergency. We have a third reading on ordinance number 4, 2020, an ordinance to approve an assessment agreement with the City of Cincinnati, Greater Cincinnati Waterworks.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea,
I move that we adopt ordinance 4, 2020.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bailey.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion to approve ordinance 04, 2020 by Mr. O'Shea, second by Ms. Bailey. Discussion? Ms. DeWalt, please call the roll.
Ms. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Hedger,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak,
Yes.
Ms. Zorg,
Yes.
Ms. Hartman,
Yes.
Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
We have a third reading on ordinance 8. An ordinance requiring the use of facial masks in public to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea.
at the council meeting on July the 6th, Mayor Nichols stated that she was working with the law director to draft an ordinance to require these facial coverings be worn in indoor public spaces. And Ms. Nichols wasn't sure when the proposed legislation would be ready, but she stated she had hoped that it would be in a couple of weeks, maybe just 1 week. Now, a couple of my colleagues asked that she present that piece of legislation as soon as possible. But let's be clear, no member of council requested ordinance 8. Now, on July the 8th, just 2 days later, we received notification of a special meeting scheduled for July the 9th. And the agenda of that special meeting included the first reading of ordinance 8. And with the notification was an initial copy of the ordinance 8. And it was the first time that we were ever able to review what would really be the first draft of ordinance 8. Now, I think we all know that typically legislation is supposed to go to committee prior to being on the agenda for a council meeting. We know that committees provide the opportunity to discuss the legislation a little more openly, and then they also generally would provide the opportunity for the public to review and discuss that legislation. Now, for those who haven't read it, Ordinance 8 already recognizes that there is a state mandate to wear facial coverings. Ordinance 8 also states that individuals under 6 years old are exempt. However, the state mandate reads that individuals under 10 are exempt. So in North College Hill, let's think about this, 7, 8, and 9-year-olds in North College Hill would be required to wear masks. Also, Ordinance 8 exempts any individual who cannot wear a facial covering because of a medical condition, but it additionally recognizes that the individuals are not required to produce any medical documentation. I think we also need to remember that as an ordinance with a penalty, you get cited to court, and I believe there's a $25 fine. This becomes a codified ordinance, and it has to be submitted to Water Drain. They have to post it on the online, in the Big Green Book, and on the online areas. Now, I'm pretty sure that all members of council and the administration would have to agree that this is only a temporary issue. And being temporary, council would then need to repeal Ordinance 8 once the virus is mitigated. I mean, this is strictly for a virus that's going to go away. But let's go back. I need to go back to the beginning. We think about what happened with the pandemic. On March 24, Mayor Nichols was compelled to declare and proclaim a local emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that proclamation encouraged the citizens to stay home, much like the stay-at-home or the stay-safe order that came from the state. But at no time was legislation ever requested or presented for council's approval. Now, in essence, Mayor Nichols, I believe, felt that the issue was so important that she didn't want to wait for council's approval. I didn't agree with that, but she has that authority and she was compelled to take that responsibility. And now Mayor Nichols apparently believes that our citizens should be required to wear facial coverings, but it seems like she doesn't want to take responsibility by making just another emergency proclamation for that requirement. Now, look, I get it. This is a very polarizing issue, but I feel in this case, Mayor Nichols is trying to pass the buck on council and not take that responsibility. The bottom line is this: Ordinance 8 was not requested by council. Ordinance 8 has not been properly vetted through the committee process. Ordinance 8 has only been read during special meetings, which provides little to no opportunity for public participation, especially during the online meeting. We've already recognized Ordinance 8 is not enforceable. Hey, I've got a medical condition. It's none of your business. Ordinance 8 is unnecessary and should not move forward because wearing masks in public places is already mandated at the state level. Mr. President, I move that Ordinance 8 be postponed indefinitely.
Mr. President,
Ms. Nichols?
I would like to respond to Mr. O'Shea.
There is a
Mr.
motion on the
President, I
floor.
apologize. Mr.
Oh.
President,
Ms. Underwood?
Mayor Nichols, I apologize for interrupting you, but I do want to make one correction to what Mr. O'Shea said. I actually did request for Ms. Nichols for the administration to draft a face mask ordinance. I believe, Mr. O'Shea, you were not present at the meeting when I made that request. So this was not something I requested this. I absolutely requested it. I requested it. So, and my understanding is that not every ordinance has to go through committee, but I do understand there's a motion on the floor.
And absolutely, Mr. O'Shea, I'm not trying to pass the buck to anyone. Ms. Underwood expressed interest in the ordinance, and so did Mr. Miller Novak. So I don't, as she stated as well, all legislation that hits the floor does not always go through committee, and it does not also always go to council. There is many and plenty of legislation that has come directly from the law director. As a matter of fact, when I was president of council, some of the, when I would request it, some of it would go directly to the council floor. And I'm not sure if this piece here, I'm sorry, because Mr. Mosby received it before I did, if he forwarded to Mr. Graver. So I'm not trying to pass the buck to anyone. It is of great importance that we wear a mask within the city. It's your prerogative if you choose not to. As we had discussed before, no, the police most more than likely will not pull people over and ask them, why don't you wear your mask? But I'm sure when you go on Kroger's, you have to wear your mask. So that doesn't change within the city limits. It is a state mandate, and we also want it mandated within our city. Thank you, Mr. Graver.
Mr.
Right,
President.
Mr. Miller Novak?
Yeah, I mean, I do remember it being requested. I don't remember exactly what meeting. So that is truth. And furthermore, you know, for the mayor to ask for council to pass an ordinance as opposed to some kind of administrative order, you know, constitutionally speaking or procedurally speaking, when you're regulating really anything or passing laws that change human behavior or regulate human behavior, whether it's speed zone or anything like that, ultimately legislative power is stronger for setting such policies than administrative actions. So for a mayor to ask a council to create an ordinance that sets a policy rather than trying to handle it through an administrative function, it's not necessarily passing the buck if that mayor is going to proclaim that this is what she wants and what she believes in. It's just good practice, quite frankly. That's it.
Okay, so there is a motion for Mr. O'Shea on the floor to postpone Ordinance 8, 2020 indefinitely.
Mr. President, I'll second that motion.
All right, motion for Mr. O'Shea, second for Ms. Zorb to postpone ordinance 8/2020 indefinitely. Any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Miss Bailey,
No.
Mr. Hedger,
No.
Miss Underwood,
No.
Mr. Miller Novak,
No.
Miss Zorb,
Yes.
Miss Hartman,
Yes.
Mr. O'Shea,
Yes.
Mr. President, motion to postpone indefinitely has failed 4-3.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bailey.
I would like to make a motion that we adopt this ordinance.
Mr. President,
Mr. Miller Novak.
just discussion. There's a couple questions we had in the past that Mr. Dieters, I think, kind of showed up today. I think I had asked him to specifically be here to answer a couple questions we might have before voting on this. I'm saying that I have a question. So can I ask it? Okay. Mr. Dieters, if you're listening in your car as you drive, I know Mr. O'Shea had brought up the age difference between our ordinance, which I understand mirrors the city of Cincinnati. I mean, I'll have to admit that I'm in favor of it in the sense of protecting our teachers in the elementary school, as well as multiple students within the elementary school, being that it's going to open a couple days a week. But I know Mr. O'Shea had described it as a conflict in one of the meetings. And as I at least pontificated in that meeting, that sometimes laws at a local level go a little further than a state level. So I just want to make sure that you considered that when you drafted it, and that we're not stepping on the wrong crack here by changing the age recommendation with the ordinance to go beyond what the state currently has in place.
Yeah, Mr. President, if I could respond to that.
Yes, please.
Mr. Novak, yes, as long as ours could be more restrictive than the state, so we have the ability to regulate further as long as we meet the minimum that the state has. There is no conflict per se. If we would have been in violation of the state and had a higher age, that would have been a problem. The states would have trumped ours, but it's possible to be meet the obligations of the state regulation and meet ours at the same time, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it's kind of like the federal state preemption, where state labor laws, for instance, can be more aggressive than the federal, as long as this goes as far enough. Or,
the federal, good example could be the federal speed limit could be 70, but a state could say, in this particular area, we wish to make it less than that because there's something else or some other consideration for that road or that area.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to point out as well, Mr. Miller Novak, that I do believe the school is exempt from our order because they have their own protocols they're going to follow.
Yeah, well, I mean, I got the school's protocol, and so I'm aware of that. Okay, all right, thanks.
Motion from Ms. Bailey to adopt ordinance 8/2020.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood.
I'll second that motion.
Motion for Ms. Bailey, second for Ms. Underwood. Any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Miss Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Hedger,
Yes.
Miss Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak,
Yes.
Miss Zorb,
No.
Miss Hartman,
No.
Mr. O'Shea.
No.
Mr. President, this resolution has an emergency clause to it. So right now I've got my council rules mixed up in my head. So does this pass with the 4-3? Mr. O'Shea, you'd probably know that better than me. That's
Well, we
what,
asked
this,
the law director.
That,
Emergencies
this
have
is,
to have 5.
that's why I thought emergency has to have more than the 4 votes.
excuse me, Mr. President.
Mr. Mosby.
I appreciate Mrs. DeWald's question. So if an ordinance or a resolution has an emergency clause, I mean, that would mean that it goes into effect immediately. This particular piece of legislation has already been through the 3 readings and it is passed. So when it says emergency, normally it's supposed to take 30 days before it takes effect. And this is a piece of legislation now that would go into effect immediately.
But
Mr. Dieters, could you please respond to that?
Please, Mr. Dieters. Mr. Dieters, would you like to respond, please?
We're losing.
Still showing there, but he is not responding.
Mr. President.
Mr. Miller Novak.
Well,
Mr.
we don't have.
President, I have it in the council rules if you want me to read it.
Hang on, Ms. DeWald.
Well, I think it's a charter issue. It doesn't matter right now. The vote has been taken. We can check with Mr. Dieters. I mean, the vote's the vote, the tally's the tally. Whether or not, I'm not sure. I think there is a rule about 5, but whether or not that is required for the emergency provision, it still passes if it's 4 without the emergency provision.
Mr. President, I have the answer. It is in our council rules 9.6 emergency ordinances. In order to take immediate effect, an emergency ordinance must receive an affirmative vote of 5 of the members.
Right. Well, that's in order to take immediate effect. The question is whether or not it passes without the immediate effect at 4. And we don't have to have that answer now. The record's the record. We can find out the answer and figure it out from there.
All right, Mr. O'Shea.
Pertaining to the charter, it's very clear that section 9.09 says procedure of passage of an emergency ordinance or resolution. The council may, with an affirmative vote of not less than 5 members, pass emergency ordinances or resolutions to take effect immediately upon their passage. This did not get 5 affirmative votes, and it was declared an emergency, so the legislation failed.
Okay, so I do agree with Mr. Miller Novak on the fact that when we will make sure that we follow through with this on Mr. Dieters, but we do have a 4-3 tally. So we will move on to the next one.
Third reading on Resolution 9, a resolution to decertify assessments to the county auditor for the placement on the tax duplicate.
Mr. President,
Bailey.
I would like to make a motion that we adopt Resolution 9, 2020. And Mr. President, just a little bit of a background on why for this one. I did ask Mr. Knight if we charged incorrectly for rental registration on the address mentioned in this, and he did tell me yes. And as Mr. Knight has always been very, very honest and meticulous, I think that we did this in error and we should make it right.
Okay, so we do have a motion.
Mr. President,
Ms. Orb.
I would like to point out that I also had asked Mr. Knight the specifics of this, and I was directed to Mr. Mosby for specifics, and I have never received any of those specifics. So I know you state that Mr. Knight doesn't make mistakes, but I have nothing to go on. I have no facts to back up this claim.
Mr. President?
Are you, Mr. O'Shea?
Yes, I'll second the motion.
Motion from Ms. Bailey to adopt Resolution 9, 2020 with a second from Mr. O'Shea. Other discussion? Please call the roll, Ms. Dewald.
Miss Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Hedger,
Yes.
Miss Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak,
Sorry, my thumb was not working. Yes.
Miss Orb,
No.
Miss Hartman,
Yes.
Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1.
Thank you. Next.
Resolution 10, 2020, a resolution to assess unpaid water service accounts to the Hamilton County Auditor. Third reading.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea?
I move that we adopt Resolution 10, 2020.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bailey?
Mr. O'Shea, I don't have this one in front of me, but I'm pretty sure this is the second piece that we didn't need because we're not assessing it at this time. I don't think that we need to pass this because there's no addresses to assess water bills to.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea?
Ring a bell?
I was under the impression that that discussion from months ago was addressed, and I agree with Ms. Bailey. I do not have it in front of me to see if this is similar to the where we need to specify which addresses. Then I would need to withdraw my motion.
Mr. President,
Mr. President?
Ms. Dewald?
this piece of legislation is in fact the original that was sent out from the very beginning. There have been no changes on it. It's not in our normal format and there are no addresses on it.
Ms.
Mr.
Orb?
President.
Mr. President, I was just going to say similarly that there are no addresses listed on this document.
Ms. Bailey?
That was received in error on my part. I had asked for it, I guess, as a template for future use, and I submitted it, which again was an error. And we did discuss this in a council meeting that there were no addresses on it and that we could finish out the readings and then decide what to do with it there. But this was an error on my part. And yeah.
Mr. President, having said that, I will officially withdraw my original motion, and I now move that we postpone Resolution 10, 2020 indefinitely.
Mr. President, I will second that.
Give me a second. All right. So we have a motion from Mr. O'Shea, a second from Ms. Bailey to postpone Resolution 10-2020 indefinitely, correct?
Correct.
Discussion? Please call the roll.
Miss Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Hedger,
Yes.
Miss Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak,
Yes.
Miss Zorb,
Yes.
Miss Hartman,
Yes.
Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Motion to postpone indefinitely passes 7-1. 7-0.
Yes, 7-0.
7-0, yeah.
Hey, my camera came back on. It's been awesome.
There you are.
Darn.
Old business. We're up to old business.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood.
I would just like to just say again that I think it would benefit the members of council greatly if we actually knew what the police department was doing with regard to the stats. And I have seen a sample report from another agency, and I will do my level best to actually procure a copy of that report so that council can see what I'm talking about and why I keep insisting that, you know, we have this information. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other old business?
Yes, Mr. President.
Ms. Bailey.
I want to go on record saying that the car show has not been canceled because of any politics in the city at all. I brought it up at the last public safety meeting, but it will be discussed in city and community development. But so far, nothing has been discussed about the car show, so I just want to set the record straight.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb.
I was actually going to bring this up in new business because I didn't know how it could be old, but okay. I was looking at the calendar again, and if we wait until city and community development, it might be too late to actually put out the notice. I mean, certainly if Mr. Trout is working towards gifts and funding for the car show, I think it would be respectful to let him know as soon as possible if we've decided to cancel the car show instead of waiting another week or two to let him know. Is that the way the city is going? I mean, who makes that final decision, and can it be made tonight?
Mr. President,
Ms. Bailey.
in a perfect world, I would think that the Recreation Commission would do this because I really don't see how it falls on us to say yes or no for a community event. I think we're probably going to bear the brunt of the weight of it. I'm cool to discuss it tonight, but
Mr. President.
Mr. Miller Novak.
Well, I mean, I agree and disagree with Ms. Bailey. I mean, it is on us in the sense that they use our streets, we block them off. City resources are given to it. But my whole thing is, am I ready to discuss it? I mean, I don't know. I don't really think I am, in the sense that no safety plan has been brought to me. So, I mean, I don't know, like, what we would be discussing at this point.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea.
I believe this is really an administrative issue. It's not something that we're going to legislate. However, whatever method, tool they use to close a public right-of-way down, it's going to run through administration. And if administration says that we're not doing, it's not a legislative issue. I don't think that's something that we can really, we should be trying to legislate.
Sounds good to me.
Mr. President,
Ms. DeWalt.
before we close this topic, I continue to get static interference, so I'm imagining watching this movie when it's all over is going to be just as much fun as living it. I would like to ask Miss Bailey. I heard her mention car show, and I heard her mention canceled, but I'm not sure if she confirmed that it was not canceled. Miss Bailey?
Mr. President, Ms. Diebold, I said that it had not been canceled, that we hadn't discussed it yet.
Okay, so that we're aware of, it has not been canceled.
To my knowledge, right.
Okay. And so in the beginning of this meeting tonight, I believe someone said it was canceled. And I'm going through my notes here and I don't see. Was that you, Mayor Nichols?
It was me.
Was Ms. Hartman?
Oh.
Some knowledge came through to me that it was more than likely not going to happen due to some things that happened last year. That is all.
Okay. So it is truly up in the air then, because we don't have a solid answer from anyone.
Well, Madam President, I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Mr. Miller, no.
Well, sorry, I'm still adjusting to you, Mike. So, I mean, if Ms. Hartman said it has something to do with something that happened last year, then if it's not about the safety issue, then what are we discussing? I don't even understand, because now it's not about the safety or COVID or mask or anything that we were talking about presently, which you said something last year. So I'm curious what that is and if that's something we can even resolve.
I was ready to move on because I do agree with Mr. O'Shea that this is an administrative decision and not a legislative decision.
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger.
Just to my understanding, are we moving this to community development or is it going to administration?
I just needs to go to the administration.
Mr. President.
Mr. Miller, no.
I mean, is it not legislative? Don't we have to appropriate money for it? I mean, haven't we in the past, or are we not?
Money has been appropriated in the budget.
Yeah, it is appropriated in a line item in the budget.
Okay, then council out, I guess. Administration, you're up.
Mr. President.
Mr. Mosby.
Yeah, I guess the first thing I would like to know, I know Ms. Hartman brought up this issue, but I'm curious as to what she believed occurred last year that would have prevented something or the car show from moving forward this year. Because I don't know.
I just brought it up in the call of members, just something that ran into an individual that is in charge of the car show that I asked looking forward to it this year, and it was presented to me that it's probably not happening, and only said was due to some politics. That's all I know. I would like to see it happen, but that's why I just used it in the call of members. That's all I got.
Mr. President.
Mr. Mosby.
So back in March, when we first were made aware of course, COVID-19, and as Mr. O'Shea actually said earlier, when the mayor did issue the proclamation, we had already been concerned about gatherings, and so we had we had shut down. As you all know, we didn't do a Memorial Day parade. We didn't do a graduation. They did do the car parade, but that was obviously, people in the cars. So we had already early on said that we were not going to plan any major gatherings for the remainder of the year because we just didn't know how things were going to go with this. So this had nothing to do, and I guess I want to just make it clear, this had nothing to do with anything that happened last year or anything like that. This was strictly a result of the effects of COVID-19.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mosby. So is the car show a go or a no-go?
No, we did not. Again, we didn't plan to have a car show this year.
Thank you. Moving on. Any other old business?
Mr. President,
Mr. Miller Novak.
I move that we adjourn.
Well, I'm going to have to allow for new business. It is an item on the agenda. I will hold your motion, though. Any new business? Hearing none, we do have a motion to adjourn from Mr. Miller Novak.
Mr. President, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Zorb. Motion for Mr. Miller Novak, second for Ms. Zorb to adjourn. Please call the roll.
Ms. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Hedger,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak,
Yes.
Ms. Zorb,
Yes.
Ms. Hartman,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Shea.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn passes 7-0.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe out there.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.